Hi, I'm Jacob Hornberger, president of the Future of Freedom Foundation. Welcome to this week's Trump Watch. Well, there's always humor when it comes to Donald Trump, even in the midst of all the chaos and the crises and the catastrophes. And the latest bit of humor comes about because of Ronald Reagan, of all people, Ronald Reagan. Here's the backstory on what's going on. As everyone knows, Trump has launched these trade wars against countries all around the world, including Canada. And so the Canadians obviously are responding and retaliating and so forth, just as every nation does when a trade war is launched against them. They're imposing their own restrictions on buying from Americans and importing American goods and so forth. But in the midst of all this, the head or president or governor or whatever of Ontario purchased an advertisement on television during the World Series featuring Ronald Reagan. And they took an excerpt out of a talk that Reagan gave, blasting the idea of economic protectionism, tariffs, trade wars, and so forth, and arguing against the very things that happen when you launch these trade wars, like the other nation retaliates and trade starts to get restricted and economic conditions start worsening. People are put out of jobs or put out of businesses go into bankruptcy and so forth. And so all they did was just show this excerpt. No comment or anything like that, just showed Ronald Reagan talking. Well, Trump went ballistic. And he said, "You're just trying to influence the Supreme Court, which is getting ready to decide the constitutionality of his unilateral trade decisions." And so he arbitrarily just raised tariffs 10% on Canada to punish them for Ontario's having published this advertisement. And so the argument also was being made by people, well, it was taken out of context. It's an excerpt. Well, what they're referring to is that Reagan was saying that during the period of time when there was trade tensions between Japan and the United States, that Reagan was responding to some kind of protectionist measure Japan had done by enacting a retaliatory tariff. In other words, doing the exact same thing that he said causes nations to do, but then emphasize in an overall general sense how destructive economic tariffs are. They're attacks, and Trump understands that. You know, he was at first saying, "Oh no, it's the foreign nations that are going to pay these, and it's going to enrich America," and it's pure nonsense. And this is what Reagan was pointing out, that in an overall sense, we cannot go down this road. And of course, this has been the trend toward free trade that has been now in existence for decades all over the world. And it's really a phenomenal experience of how, freedom ideas on economic liberty can really grab hold of not only one's own nation, but nations all over the world. And so for decades, there's been this move. Now, it hasn't been free trade as we libertarians would like it. That is, no governmental restrictions at all. But it's been very, very minimal until Trump came along. And we've seen the result. We saw the result in the first term in which he was serving as president. Same things that Reagan predicted. Trump launched the trade war against China. They retaliated, stopped buying crops from American farmers to teach Trump a lesson. And those farmers went into bankruptcy. And because they're not selling their crops into China anymore, because China's retaliating for what Trump had done. And then Trump uses the tariff money, which are taxes, sales taxes being paid by the American people, to establish a welfare program for those farmers. Well, farmers weren't interested in welfare. I'm sure that most of them took the money. It's free, so-called free money. But that's not what life is all about. Life isn't going on welfare. Life is, running a farm, producing, serving people of the world by giving them food or selling them food. And so we see the same thing now in Trump's second term, launching these trade wars and just willy-nilly raising tariffs on his own initiative, not going to Congress. I mean, we often talk about, dictatorship. But what is dictatorship? There's a common notion that if there's not mass numbers of people being massacred by a dictator, that it's not a dictatorship. That's pure nonsense. A dictator is a ruler that has no restrictions on his power. And so when you look at Trump raising tariffs just willy-nilly without going to Congress saying, may I establish a tariff against this nation? That's what we're talking about dictatorial conduct. And of course, Trump is saying, well, the Congress was foolish enough to delegate this power to the president to declare a national emergency and therefore have this power. But Congress cannot constitutionally delegate its powers. The Congress has the power of taxation, of enacting laws. And that's really one of the major issues that the Supreme Court's going to have to decide is does Trump really have this authority as president to just 20% you, 70% you, 80% you, 10% you, which is essentially raising taxes on the American people. It's like if a president said, well, I'm going to raise taxes on the American people, income taxes, by 20%. I don't need to go to Congress. I'm just going to raise income taxes. I think most of us would say that's dictatorial conduct. Well, it's no different with respect to a national sales tax, which is what a tariff is. It's a national sales tax on the purchase of goods in foreign nations. And we can see people going bankrupt now. Same thing, the farmers, soybeans. The Chinese said, okay, you want to play this game? We won't buy any more soybeans from your farmers. So they started buying from Argentina. And of course, the American farmers are saying, what in the heck is going on here? We supported Trump. Why is he attacking us? But they're going bankrupt, and now they're upset because Trump is using U.S. taxpayer money to bail out the Malay regime, monetarily, because it's having problems with the Argentine peso plummeting in value. So they're going to use the dollar to go in there and buy pesos to kind of buttress up its value. And so naturally, American farmers are saying, but wait a minute, Argentina's the ones, they're over there buying all these soybeans because China is retaliating. I mean, what's going on here? So Trump is contemplating establishing a welfare program for those American farmers, just like in the first term. And meanwhile, it's not just the farmers, though. There's a lot of small businesses going out of business because they depended on inexpensive goods that they were buying at wholesale prices in China, bringing over here, reselling them. It's a classic retail business. I imagine most of it's online, but maybe not. But they're going out of business now. They can't afford to pay these enormous prices because of Trump's tariffs. And another humorous part of all this was when Amazon said, "But we're going to disclose how much the price on the breakdown of anything we sell. We're going to disclose how much of that is the tariffs." And Trump went ballistic and got Jeff Bezos on the phone or somehow communicated with him and made it very clear, you are not going to do this. And Bezos said, okay, I changed my mind. I mean, it's just total fear. That's dictatorial conduct, when you're fearful of what the ruler can do to you. I mean, posting the price is just freedom of speech. That's all it is. I mean, Amazon's got that right to express what the price of the tariff is on each item. But boy, now I'm not saying that the ruler, Trump, enacted a law, but he doesn't need a law. He rules by decree in many instances. So he issues the decree, or he gets on the phone and he says, you will not do that. And everybody in the business community knows what his power is. I mean, the federal government, because it was converted into a regulatory state, a managed economy state back in the 1930s, they have the power to destroy. They got the IRS too. They have the power to destroy a business through regulations. You see this in the banking industry, where the banks are subject to these surprise inspections by the banking inspectors, and every banking official just quivers and quakes from the president on down when the banking inspectors pop in and say, we're going to inspect, because they know that there's no way you can ever be in full compliance with all the banking regulations. It's like the tax code. Whenever they want to get somebody, they use the tax code because it's so easy to be violating all these minute rules and regulations. And so the banking officials cater, and they wine and dine and are very nice and passive and obsequious to the banking inspectors. Well, it's the same thing with Amazon or any other business. They're scared to death of what the federal government will do, and so they want to please the government. So you're never going to see the CEOs in these major corporations speaking out against what's going on in foreign policy or anything like that. They just stay quiet for fear of what can be done to them. But anyway, the Ronald Reagan thing was kind of humorous. The Ontario government said that they would stop publishing the ad after the World Series on this past Monday, and they showed it again. It was kind of funny. All right, so let's move to Venezuela. It's a fascinating situation in Venezuela because it's a classic example of where the federal government and the national security establishment and Trump concoct a new crisis. I mean, just 6 months ago, there wasn't a crisis in the Caribbean, and all of a sudden, there's a crisis. Isn't that coincidental? Now, when the Cold War ended, the national security establishment naturally was caught flat-footed, shocked. I mean, they couldn't believe this had happened because the Cold War was a big cash cow for the national security establishment. They had convinced Americans that the communists were coming to get them, the Reds were coming, the Cuba outpost 90 miles away, North Korea, Vietnam, Soviet Union, Red China. The Reds were coming, you see, the communists were coming. There was a movie, The Russians Are Coming. And fear is the coin of the realm in a national security state. Fear and crises and chaos. And so that had been a big cash cow, the Cold War, and suddenly it ends. You see, and people were talking about a peace dividend, which meant drastic reduction. Didn't mean a dismantling of the national security state, which is what they should have done. Just totally dismantle it, because it was the Cold War that was used as a justification for the conversion of the federal government from a limited government republic, which was our founding governmental system, had lasted more than 100 years. They used that as the excuse to convert it to a national security state, which is a totalitarian type of governmental structure with omnipotent powers of assassination, torture, coups, indefinite detention, where essentially the Pentagon, the CIA, and the NSA are running the show. They're in charge because of the overwhelming power that they wield within the governmental structure. So when the Cold War ends, it's like, oh my gosh, because clearly now people are going to start asking, well, why do we need a national security state now that the Cold War is over, since that was the justification? So they said, well, wait a minute. They were panicking. And I remember this. They were proposing that they could get involved in the drug war, that we can help protect America from the drug dealers and the drug cartels. And of course, the drug war has always been just great big racket from the beginning. I mean, imagine the notion that a government wields the authority to put somebody in jail for ingesting an unapproved substance. You couldn't find a better example of a destruction of individual freedom than that. And so the Pentagon was saying, we can participate in the drug war. So this is ironic that they're now doing what they proposed to do. They're involved in this giant military enterprise against the narco-terrorist Navy and the narco-terrorist armies, and it's the most ridiculous thing you've ever seen. I mean, they just blast these little boats out of the water and say, we have won a great naval battle. There's been no loss of American military personnel here. And then they knocked out a submarine. It said, oh my gosh, we've knocked out a enemy submarine belonging to the narco-terrorist cartel armies, and it's phenomenal. And they do it all with a straight face. I mean, I assume that they, when I was in the military, in the infantry, they had what was called the Confederate Infantry Badge. I imagine it's still there, but it was awarded to any infantryman that had been involved in combat. And so I would imagine the same thing applies to these naval and air forces in the Caribbean, that they're going to get combat badges to put on their uniforms for the combats that they've been engaged in. Like I just wrote in my blog this week, this is like the Battle of Midway in the Caribbean, where you've got these naval forces, and now they've called these gigantic reinforcements an aircraft carrier and a strike force with destroyers to escort the aircraft carrier. Well, what's going to happen with all this? Okay, they've defeated the cartel navy. Okay, the boats are not coming out anymore, and my hunch is they've also killed some fishermen, but we don't know. They've killed some 40 some odd people, and with total illegality. I mean, what's the justification here? The drug war? They don't have authority to kill people in the drug war. Drug war is a criminal offense. Okay? Even here in the United States, they don't have the authority to do that. And in the Philippines, that's what former President Duterte is charged with before the International Criminal Court. He's being charged with killing drug war suspects, or authorizing or ordering their killing. And but Trump doesn't worry about that, and these military personnel obviously don't worry about it, because they are not subject to the International Criminal Court. And the idea that the Justice Department would indict them for this, not going to happen. They control the Justice Department. What would be really fascinating is if some runaway federal grand jury issued an indictment, said to heck with the U.S. attorney, who clearly would be opposing it, but they have the authority to issue their own indictment. Be fascinating to see what would happen then, because there is no authority to kill a drug war suspect unless he's using deadly force against you, shooting at you or something. But there's been no indication of that. In fact, the New York Times reported that one of these boats was turning back toward Venezuela, and it's essentially shooting them in the back. And they've tried to get around this by saying, "Oh, they're terrorists, narco terrorists." Well, the fact that somebody is an accused terrorist, which of course is pure nonsense, is clear. It's just a sham to justify these killings, extrajudicial killings. But terrorism itself is a criminal offense. Right? You don't have the law enforcement doesn't have the authority here in the United States to just go out and kill anybody they say is a terrorist, unless that person is using deadly force, just like the drug law. It's no different. You have to take people into custody. You have to charge them, indict them. That's our system of government. And yet Trump and the Pentagon are saying, no. As soon as we label somebody a terrorist, we can kill them. And now they're saying, oh, but we're at war. We're at war. And at war, we can kill the enemy. Well, that's ridiculous. I mean, they've been at war with the drug war. They call it a drug war for decades. Still doesn't give them the authority. We're at war against the cartels. It's no different. The drug cartels are part of the drug war. And we're at war with the terrorists. It's just, again, another figure of speech. You have to take suspected terrorists into custody under our system of government. So they're just killing them. Extrajudicial killings. It's fascinating. And to show you the sham of all this is the prisoners. Okay. Their worst nightmare happens. This submarine that they attacked, all of a sudden, 2 people are bobbing in the water. And it's got to have just blown their minds. What do we do? What do we do? Should we kill them? Why not? If you blow them up when they're in the submarine, or blow them up when they're in a boat, why not just shoot them while they're bobbing in the water? What's the difference? But they clearly were a little bit, uncomfortable with shooting unarmed people bobbing in the water, even though they feel very comfortable shooting people who are in a boat that's bobbing in the water. But they didn't kill them. They took them into custody. Okay, now, under their rationale, these are prisoners of war, right? They're saying, oh, we're at war with the drug cartels. We're at war with the narco-terrorist cartels. Okay, these are prisoners of war. You take prisoners of war and you hold them in POW camps for as long as the war lasts, which, of course, in this case would be forever, because the drug war goes on forever, the war on terrorism goes on forever. But they knew that there would be some legal challenges here, which would be their worst nightmare. I don't think there's anything to worry about. I think that the federal courts would say whatever you guys decide is fine with us. They call it the political question doctrine, that they're not going to question anything political that the national security establishment's doing. But they didn't want to take that chance of having to litigate this thing. So then they felt sheepish, I'm sure, about executing them there after they had taken them into custody or throwing them overboard and letting them drown like Pinochet was doing in Chile. But so they release them back to their countries. And interestingly enough, one was from Colombia, okay, not from Venezuela, where they say that they're waging this war on the boat people. And the other one was from Ecuador. And they say, well, we're releasing them to be prosecuted. Well, there's no guarantee they're going to be prosecuted. They need evidence to prosecute them. Now, Colombia, interestingly enough, who's also at war with Trump. Trump has said the president of Venezuela is a narco dealer himself because the president of Colombia. Colombia said that these killings are wrongful, that they're extrajudicial killings, they're illegal. And Trump got furious, went ballistic over that, and said, "Oh, you're a narco yourself. You're obviously part of these drug dealers." And so they're cutting aid to Colombia, which is really weird because Colombia is where the U.S. national security establishment was waging the war on drugs fiercely back in the 80s. Go see Narcos on Netflix. Fantastic series, all based on truth. They were going after the big drug dealer, Pablo Escobar, who was making millions and hundreds of millions of dollars, one of the wealthiest people in the world, on selling cocaine into the United States. And they made this big hullabaloo that, and this is the way to win the war on drugs. We get Escobar and it's over. Well, it's pure nonsense. They kill Escobar. They kill him. Okay? Well, he's immediately replaced by new drug cartels. That's the way the black market works. But the idea that you're going to win the war on drugs by killing these boat people is ridiculous, because the cartel leaders, the Escobars, are still up there. These are just the little people that they're killing. Now let me talk. When I say little people, let me clarify this. These are human beings. Okay, these are people whose right to life exists just like the right to life of everybody. God creates human beings, and there is something called the sanctity of life. You don't just go kill people willy-nilly. And I find it interesting that Republicans are known for being pro-life, and the whole abortion issue, pro-life. Go vote for Republicans if you're pro-life. It's ridiculous. Because look at how they treat these people in these boats. There's no sanctity of life here. There's no pro-life mentality. There's no remorse. There's no, we're sorry that we extinguish these lives. And these are lives of innocent people. Now they're saying, oh, well, we suspect them of being drug dealers and maybe they had some secret surveillance or whatever. Every person under our system of government is presumed innocent until he's proven guilty in a court of law. They're as innocent as you and I are until they're proven guilty. And they never proved him guilty. They just killed him. And that's how they value the life of foreigners. Now, notice that they always want to emphasize American troops have not lost their lives in these escapades because American troops, their lives are considered more valuable. You saw this with the sanctions against the Iraqi people, where the sanctions were killing hundreds of thousands of people, including Iraqi children. It was saying, Madeleine Albright expressed she was Secretary of State, I think, at the time. Not sure what her position was officially, or maybe U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations. They asked her what about this 500,000 children that you've killed with the sanctions? And she says, oh yeah, it's a tough decision, but it's worth it. Now, it was worth it to get regime change. And one gets the impression that these deaths here of these people, boat people, poor people, these are not the cartel leaders. You're not going to win the war on drugs. You're not going to win it even with killing the cartel leaders like Pablo Escobar. You're not going to win this war at all. It's a racket that's been going on for decades, and it's a racket that unfortunately the American people continue to approve of. The thought that we're winning, we're killing these boat people. So naturally, people are thinking, well, there's got to be an ulterior motive. I mean, nobody can really believe this, that by killing the boat people, you're going to win the war on drugs. You're finally going to stop drugs, illicit drugs, from coming into the United States. Ridiculous. And so some people are thinking this is about regime change, just like it was in Iraq, where Trump is hoping that all of this military armament, this massive armada, is going to scare the death out of Nicolas Maduro, the socialist dictator there in Venezuela. He's going to strike a deal where he goes and retires at Costa Rica or Spain or something like that with, hundreds of millions of ill-gotten gain dollars but so far he's not budging, and so Trump's kind of put himself in a trap here. I mean, what does he do with this massive armada now that is there? What, continue to kill boat people? Well, the boat people are going to stop taking boats out, including the fishermen. Nobody's going to. So he's going to destroy the fishing, the little villages there to depend on fishermen and so forth. What does he do? Does he just withdraw that massive armada? Where does he send it? Over here to the United States, where he says we've got an enemy within. I mean, this is it's not a good situation he's in. Or does he use it to invade Venezuela and just oust him, Maduro, or kill Maduro, or capture him, bring him back to the U.S. in chains, parade him down Constitution Avenue in chains, and then lock him up, put him in solitary confinement, like they did with Noriega, the president of Panama, who had been a former ally of the CIA. It's not clear how this thing's going to play out. But the commanding general of the Southern Command there, he suddenly resigned after 1 year of a 3-year term. And he didn't explain why, but my hunch is because he didn't feel comfortable as a matter of conscience of using military force to kill people illegitimately. And so, one can commend him for that if that was the reason, but one cannot commend him for not telling his reasons if that was his reason. Publicly say this is wrong so that the other troops can see that. But what Trump clearly is doing is consolidating power. He doesn't mind that general resign because he'll be replaced by a general who will do what he's told and not ask questions. That's what Trump is doing here. He is consolidating power. And everybody in this federal governmental structure knows that the power lies with the military intelligence establishment. You get the military intelligence establishment, CIA, Pentagon, NSA on your side, and that's it. You've got control of the federal government. And this is what Trump realizes. He's got 3 years to consolidate power. There's speculation about him running for a third term. He knows in order to remain as president, one way or the other, he has to have the power of the military intelligence establishment. The flaw in our system has always been that the judiciary cannot enforce its orders. He doesn't have the force to enforce its orders. Trump knows this. You can tell he's pushing the boundaries of getting very close to not obeying a contempt order or this order or that order and then backing off from it. And the idea is that he's seeing what he can get away with. And clearly he can get away with that the federal appellate courts are not going to enforce any kind of contempt proceeding against him at the district court level. We saw that with the Boasberg, federal judge Boasberg's contempt proceeding. He was ordering a contempt proceeding to determine what the Trump officials knew or didn't know and what they did during this whole El Salvador rendition program. And federal appeals court just shut it down. They said, apparently because they don't want a constitutional crisis here. But Trump, you think Trump doesn't notice that? And the fallacy of our system has always been that the courts don't have ways to enforce their orders. I mean, the U.S. Marshals, big deal. So if a president has consolidated power with the military intelligence established in the national security state, you're not going to stop him. He ignores a court order, so what? He's got the military behind him. And so he's got 3 years to consolidate that power, get rid of the generals and the colonels that are squeamish about obeying his orders, get in there people that are loyally going to blindly support and do whatever he orders them to do. And once that comes into play, he'll be able to do anything. I mean, not just raise tariffs willy-nilly or whatever, but raise taxes willy-nilly, punish people for being critical, not just, in terms of raising tariffs, but other measures against Americans, the enemy within, protests and demonstrations and so forth. Who's going to stop him when the military's there enforcing everything? And so the key to all, and our founding fathers understood this. That's why they fiercely opposed standing armies or national security states. They knew that a president that has consolidated power, and he's in the midst of this giant military intelligence establishment, all powerful, it is unstoppable. And you can see their quotes about standing armies and why the right to keep and bear arms was so important is a means of resistance against this kind of military intelligence tyranny. And President Eisenhower said the same thing in his farewell address, where he talked about the dangers of the military-industrial complex. Not the foreign enemies, the drug war cartels, the Russians, the Chinese, the Cubans, the communists, the terrorists. None of that, no. The real threat was the national security establishment. And so it's what I've been saying for a long time now at the Future of Freedom Foundation. There's only one real solution to this, and hopefully the American people will figure it out before it's too late. It's not a matter of getting a new president in. It's a matter of altering our form of governmental structure, getting rid of the national security state. Cold War is over, and restoring our founding governmental system of a limited government republic. That's my message. Keep in mind, we've got our series going on Libertarian Angle for 6 weeks. We're now into our fourth speaker, Michael Glennon, this week, talking about the critical importance of civil liberties. That's Trump Watch this week. Look forward to talking to you all next week.